In this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe, leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care family and friends. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I am your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so happy that you've made space to be here with us today. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I need for you to do me a quick favor. If you're feeling the vibe, go ahead and show us some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need for everyone to share this out with someone who could use a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't done so already, go ahead and give us a follow. Subscribe to our channel so that way you're always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite you to check out our digital home at theselfcareclub.org, where you will find everything you need from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported every step of the way. Just know that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I encourage you to give yourself permission to pause, to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly for you. And remember, if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop those green hearts in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Thank you so much for the roses. Welcome in, Conquering Walls. Who else do we have just come in? We've got No Fear, No Doubt. Hey, bro. Welcome in. Thank you guys so much for being here today. From whatever platform you're watching on, we definitely appreciate you being here with us today. Now, family, listen, I'm going to go ahead and give y'all a disclaimer, okay? I'm going to go ahead and warn y'all up front. Today's conversation might step on a few toes, but sometimes toes need to be stepped on so that way growth can happen. Because if we're honest, a lot of things, keeping people stuck in life aren't complicated problems, right? They're just uncomfortable truths that nobody wants to say out loud. And so today we're going to talk about one of them. All right. Today we're going to talk about something that I think quietly holds a lot of people back, even without realizing it. And it's simply, that a lot of times we're asking permission from people who never had the courage to leave their own comfort zone. Just let that sink in for a second. Asking permission from people who never had the courage to leave their own comfort zone. I think that some of y'all are sitting on dreams, right? Dreams that have been in your heart for years. Ideas that you've been thinking about late at night. Healing that you need to pursue. Boundaries that you need to set. New directions. You're being pulled towards. And the truth is, it's not that you can't do it. It's not that you're incapable of doing it. It's not even that you don't know what the next step is. It's that every single time you start getting serious about moving forward, you start looking around the room for approval. You start scanning the faces around you. You want to see who's nodding in approval. You want to see who agrees with you. Trying to see, who thinks that it makes sense. And the problem is, a lot of the people that you're looking at for permission have never actually taken a risk themselves. Approval from friends who have never tried. Approval from family who never stepped outside of, what's familiar. Many of us are still seeking approval from people who have been living the same routine for 20 years while complaining about how unhappy they are. She said, ouch. Girl, listen, I warned you. Don't come in here in no flip-flops today. I warned you. But seriously, I mean, many of us are looking for approval from folks who talk about what they wish they had done, but they never actually moved on it. And somehow those are the voices that we allow to influence our next steps. And so I think that that's the part that we need to talk about, because sometimes the people that you're asking for permission are the least qualified to give it. And that doesn't make them bad people, but you have to understand that they're speaking from a life that they chose to stay comfortable in. And when somebody has spent years convincing themselves that staying safe was the right decision, then your courage, just the mere thought of you wanting to step out to try something different can make people uncomfortable. And it's not because you're wrong. It's because your movement forces them to look at their own hesitation. And a lot of people would rather discourage your risk than to examine their own fear. And so today we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about comfort zones. We're going to talk about why people project their limitations onto others. And we're going to talk about the moment in your life where you have to stop asking the room for permission and start trusting the direction that keeps calling your name. Because some of y'all not stuck because of lack of ability. You're stuck because you keep waiting for approval from people who were never built to see the vision that you were given. Remember, God gave you that message. He didn't send it to the group chat. And so today we're going to break out of that. So let's just go ahead and jump right in to this conversation on comfort zones. Because listen, comfort zones are contagious, right? Comfort zones spread. Have y'all ever noticed that? It's like they spread the same way habits spread, the same way attitudes spread, the same way fear spreads. You don't even realize it's happening at first, right? It starts off real subtle, because when you're surrounded by people who are used to staying safe and predictable, comfortable, anything that is different suddenly starts to feel like a rebellion. Not evolution, not growth, but rebellion. You start talking about a career change and people get nervous. You start talking about going to therapy or healing your trauma and people get quiet. You start talking about setting boundaries and all of a sudden people want to tell you acting brand new, you acting different. So talking about building something new or starting a business, writing a book, launching a podcast, maybe going back to school, or even just leaving something that no longer fits you. And suddenly everybody around you becomes some professional risk analyst, right? They got charts, they got statistics, they got 10 reasons why what you're talking about doing might fail. But what's interesting is that they rarely had the same level of analysis when they chose the life that they're currently living. It's just funny to me how that works. And it just further proves that comfort zones are contagious because people normalize what they've accepted. If somebody has lived the same routine for years, the same job they complain about, the same habits that keep them drained, the same cycles they say they want to break, eventually that becomes their version of normal. And once something becomes normal, anything outside of it looks extreme. So when you show up talking about growth and healing, risk or expansion, it doesn't register as possible to them. It registers as disruption. Because now your courage is disturbing the agreement that everybody else quietly made to stay comfortable. And here's the real part that I think that people don't say out loud enough. If someone has spent years convincing themselves to stay small, right? That staying smaller is safer, then your courage to try something different can feel like a threat. Welcome in, Monique. Hi, Suzanne. Welcome in. Tania, welcome back. Elevated awakenings to you all. And so again, like I said, if somebody has spent years convincing themselves that, playing small is what's safe for them, then you showing up, having the courage to try something different starts to feel like a threat to them. And it's not because you're wrong. It's because your movement exposes the options that they decided not to take. Your growth, starts asking silent questions that they may not want to answer. Questions like, wait, if they can change, could I have changed too? Wasted Wellness, thank you. I see you. If they can leave a situation, why didn't I? Tasha Lee, welcome in. If they can pursue something different, what's stopping me? And yeah, those is uncomfortable questions, right? And so instead of sitting with that discomfort, some people find it easier to discourage the change, right? Welcome in, Shamika. They question the decision. They poke holes in your plan. They frame your growth as risky or unrealistic or unnecessary. Not because it actually is, but because it protects the story that they've been telling themselves for years. Most of the time, people aren't even doing this consciously. Yes, Conquering Wall says comparison is a dangerous game. Absolutely. What do we say? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? And so again, most people aren't doing this consciously. They're not waking up saying, oh, let me hold somebody back today. Let me keep them from their potential. They're just responding from their own fear, their own conditioning, their own experiences. But just because their reaction is understandable, it doesn't mean that you should become your limitation. Thank you for the hand hearts. Your life cannot be built around other people's comfort zones. Because if it is, you'll wake up 10 years from now living a life that makes everybody else comfortable except you. And that's the trap. Right? When we say we want to get up out the trap, that's the trap. Comfort zones don't just protect safety, they protect stagnation. And if you're, one in the room who's starting to grow, right? You're starting to heal, you're questioning things, you're pursuing something new, or you're stepping out of what's familiar, you might feel like the odd one for a while. And it doesn't mean that you're wrong. Sometimes it just means that you're the first person in that environment who decided that comfort is no longer enough. So again, you're not wrong. You're just daring to do something different. And listen, let's be real for a second. A lot of people have very strong opinions about things that they've never attempted. Never started a business before, but suddenly they're a financial advisor when you mention that you want to start one. They never wrote a book, but all of a sudden they know that publishing is too competitive. Avita, welcome in, beautiful. Do you ever have somebody who's never pursued therapy, but they real quick to tell you that healing conversations are too deep, or, you bringing up the past? They've never stepped outside of their routine, but they got a whole speech about why, new directions are risky. And I think the wildest part is they say it with confidence, y'all. Like they say it with their whole chest. Like they have studied the situation. They done ran the numbers. They have lived the experiences. But in reality, they're just speaking from the sidelines. And that's, something that you have to learn how to recognize. Because opinions are cheap. Okay? Everybody can have one. But courage, on the other hand, courage is expensive. Coach, welcome in. Courage is expensive. Courage costs comfort. It costs familiarity. Faith, welcome in, beautiful. Elevated awakenings to you. Courage costs the willingness to look foolish for a while. You gotta look crazy for a little bit, y'all. Courage costs the humility of learning something new. Brother, welcome in. And, listen, it costs something to leave what's familiar. It costs something to admit, I don't know everything, but I'm still willing to try. And there are a lot of people out here in the world who have never paid that price. So when someone who never took a risk starts criticizing or critiquing your decisions to try, you just have to pause for a moment, right? You got to take a breath and ask yourself, why am I asking someone without experience to validate my direction? Why am I asking someone without experience to validate my direction? Why am I waiting for approval from someone who has never walked the path that I'm trying to walk? Because that's like asking someone who never swam to coach you through the ocean. They can talk about the water. They can warn you about the waves. They can describe what they think might happen, but they cannot tell you how to swim through it. And the danger is, if you listen long enough to people who only speak from observation instead of experience, their fear can start sounding like wisdom. Because remember, they show up confident. They got their degree. They know everything now. And the longer you listen to it, suddenly you start second guessing yourself. You start shrinking your vision. You start wondering, maybe they're right. And it's not because they, actually understand the path, but because doubt gets louder when it's repeated enough. Right? And I think that the truth that most people won't tell you is that sometimes the loudest doubt in the room is not coming from expertise. It is coming from unlived lives. Exactly. Everybody needs to stay in their own lane. And that's what I'm saying. It's coming from unlived lives, from people who once had a dream but never moved on them, from people who thought about changing their life but never took a step to do it, from people who tried once, got scared, and decided that playing it comfortable was easier. So now when you start stepping into the unknown, they project their fear, all the fear that they felt when they were standing in that same doorway. And listen, I'm not saying this to disrespect people, right? It's not about disrespecting people. It's about discernment, right? And we talk about this all the time. It's about discernment, because everybody's voice doesn't deserve equal weight in your decisions. Advice from someone who has lived the journey, somebody who has lived the journey, that's the person who carries wisdom, right? Advice from someone who has never left the starting line, that's commentary, right? That's an opinion. That there's no insight in that. Commentary should never have the final say on your life. That is for the sidelines, right? That is the conversation from the bleachers. If someone has experience and humility and insight, then you listen, right? But if someone is only offering doubt based on what they think might happen, you might need to politely thank them for their opinion, but keep moving anyway. Because your life cannot be built around the fears of other people who have never tried. And you also have to understand that some people don't want you to grow past them. This is another thing that I don't think we're talking about enough. But again, we're being honest, right? Some people are comfortable with you as long as you stay where you are. Not ahead of them, not evolving, not healing in ways that can change the dynamic, not setting standards to make old patterns impossible. They want you to stay exactly the way that you are. Because the moment that you start growing and evolving, things start to shift, right? We know that growth changes relationships. And I think that that's the thing that people rarely prepare us for. It is something that I had to learn the hard way, because When I started healing in 2020, I had a lot more friends than I have now. Friends. We're going to use that word loosely. Friends. Right? And so nobody prepared me for, the more that I decided to heal, the more that people were going to be exposed. The more people were going to try to criticize me, talk about me, judge me. I ain't never seen so many people get up off the bleachers, y'all, and had something to say. All of a sudden, everybody want to play in the game now. Because when you start healing, you stop tolerating the things that you overlooked. The jokes that used to slide suddenly feel disrespectful. The conversations that used to feel normal start feeling draining. The behaviors you once excused start looking different as your awareness continues to grow. And that shift, oh baby, that makes people uncomfortable. It pisses them off. When you start dreaming bigger, you stop settling for situations that once felt good enough. Things that used to seem normal. You know what I'm talking about? Being underpaid, overlooked, emotionally drained, constantly accommodating everybody else. All that stuff starts standing out. And it's not because you became difficult. It's because your standards have evolved. Right? And when you start protecting your peace, chaos loses access to you. Drama loses the front row seat that it used to have in your life. People who were used to you showing up, or put it like this, people who were used to showing up unannounced in your emotional space suddenly notice that the door is closed. And that change feels very threatening to people who have benefited off of the old version of you. There are some people who have benefited from your lack of boundaries. They've benefited from you always being available, always agreeable, always shrinking yourself to keep the peace. The old version of you was easier to navigate. The old version of you didn't ask that many questions, didn't challenge the dynamics, didn't disrupt the routine. But we know that growth changes that. And, some people are okay with you growing as long as you don't grow past them. They're comfortable cheering you on while you're slightly improving. But the moment that your growth starts to shift the balance, oh, now their energy changes. Now the comments come. You've changed. You acting brand new. You think you better than people now. But growth is often misinterpreted by people who are comfortable with stagnation. Your boundaries look like distance to someone who has benefited from unlimited access to you. Your healing looks like arrogance to someone who was used to your silence. Your ambition looks like betrayal to someone who expected you to stay the same, right? To just stay in your lane, in the same lane, right? But I think that the part that needs to be understood is that most of the time it's not about hatred. It's just simply discomfort. Your growth disrupts the systems that they were comfortable with. It changes how they relate to you. It removes the roles everyone had gotten used to playing and the roles that they had gotten used to you playing. And when that system gets disrupted, the people inside often try to restore what felt familiar. That's why sometimes, you feel this subtle pressure to go back to the old you, the version of you that was easier for everyone else. But real growth don't work like that, right? Once your awareness expands, it is really hard to shrink back down without feeling the cost. I'm not saying that you can't do it. People do it all the time, but there's a cost that comes with that. Because as you're healing, you start noticing things that you didn't notice before. You start feeling the weight of old patterns that once felt normal. You start realizing that certain relationships only worked because you were operating from a smaller version of yourself. And that realization can be painful because it forces you to see who is genuinely happy for your evolution and who was more comfortable with you staying the same. So again, not everybody who struggles with your growth is doing it maliciously. Welcome back, Kashi. Avon lady, welcome in. Again, not everybody who struggles with your growth is doing it maliciously. Sometimes people simply don't know how to relate to the new version of you. Sometimes they feel insecure. Sometimes they feel left behind. But their discomfort cannot become your ceiling. Your life cannot stop evolving just to maintain somebody else's comfort. Growth will always change the dynamics around you. And the people who truly love you will eventually adjust. Sometimes they just need a little time. They may need conversations. They may need space to process the changes. But real support shows up as curiosity, encouragement, respect, not pressure to shrink. Because the truth is, the people who are meant to walk with you long term, they're not going to require you to become smaller just so they can keep that friendship intact. Thank you for the heart, Mies. You know, the right people who are meant to walk with you, they'll grow too. Or they'll at least respect your journey while you're on it. Right? It's realizing that the version of you that some people preferred was the version of you that just hadn't grown yet. But I think that, you know, here's the question that I really want you to sit with for a minute. When someone chooses the life that they're living right now, did they ask for permission first? Did they call a meeting? Did they gather everybody around the table and say, hey, before I decide what I'm going to do with my life, let me make sure that everybody approves? Did anybody do that? Probably not, right? Thank you so much. Right? They made their choices. They followed whatever it was that felt comfortable to them. They accepted the risk, right? They accepted risk, and it's like they accepted the risk that they were willing to accept and avoided the ones that they weren't, if that makes sense. These are the same people who have created their own routines. They built a life that they were willing to live. Some people chose stability over uncertainty. Some people chose, what's familiar over the unknown. Some people chose a path that required the least disruption. And listen, there is nothing inherently wrong with that. Everybody gets to decide what kind of life they want to build. But here's where things start to get strange. Once people settle into their choices, some of them start acting like their decision is the standard that everybody else should follow. Now, suddenly, the way they choose to live becomes the right way. Now, suddenly your different path becomes questionable. Suddenly, they feel qualified to evaluate your decisions. And that's the part that doesn't make sense. Because nobody asked you for permission when they decided to stay where they are. Nobody checked with you before they accepted the job that they complain about every Monday. Nobody consulted you before they stayed in a relationship that drains them. Great new day, Blue. Welcome back, sis. Nobody ran their daily routine by you before settling into habits that they've had for years. They made those decisions based upon what felt right or comfortable to them. So, my question to you is, why are you asking them for approval for yours? Why are you waiting for a green light from people who have never stepped outside their own limits? Why are you delaying your growth until someone, you know, for someone who chooses comfort, right? Why are you waiting for them to decide that they're comfortable with your risk? I believe that is a heavy place to live, because if you live your life decisions, if your life decisions require approval from people who are committed to staying the same, you're going to spend a long time waiting. And the truth is, most people aren't intentionally trying to hold you back. They're just responding from their own framework, their own fears, their own experiences. If a person has spent their entire life believing that safety comes from staying in the lane that they know, then your decision to leave the lane will naturally appear reckless to them. Not because it's actually reckless. Thank you for sharing. Right? It's just because it's unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things often look dangerous to people who have never really experienced them. But here's the reality that you have to accept at some point. Their comfort cannot become your ceiling. Their limits cannot become your limits. Their choices cannot become the blueprint of your life. Because if you build your life around making sure that everyone else feels comfortable with your decisions, you're going to wake up one day realizing that you've been living a life that was designed to make everybody else feel secure except you. And that's a quiet kind of regret, right? The kind that shows up years later when you start asking yourself, what would have happened if I just tried? What would my life have looked like if I would have just trusted myself instead of waiting for approval? And those are hard questions to sit with, because most people don't regret the things that they've tried. They regret the things they talked themselves out of, the things they delayed, the things they abandoned because somebody else's opinion felt louder than their own conviction. So let's say it clearly, y'all, right? We don't need approval, right? They don't need approval to stay where they are. They didn't consult the room before choosing comfort, and you don't need approval to grow beyond it. Coco Goddess, welcome in, beautiful. Your life is not a democracy. Your purpose is not decided by majority vote. At some point, you have to stop asking the room, is it okay for you to move forward? And just start trusting that pull that you feel towards growth might actually be the direction that you're supposed to go. Again, God put it on you. That download, that whisper, He sent that to you directly, not the group chat. He didn't consult everyone else before He told you what to do. And listen, being the only one who tries will always look strange. So just prepare to be different, right? Let's go ahead and normalize something right now. The person who tries something new always looks strange at first. And yeah, I said always. There is no version of growth where everybody immediately understands what you're doing. There is no version of innovation where people say, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. There's no version of healing where everybody around you immediately celebrates the changes. Most of the time, it looks confusing. It looks uncertain. It looks a little bit messy. But before something works, it looks like somebody figuring it out. Before someone becomes successful, they look like they're experimenting, posting things nobody asked yet, building something that hasn't taken off yet, talking about a vision that nobody else can see yet. So yeah, from the outside, it looks a little odd because people are used to celebrating results, not the process, right? People love a finished product. They love a good success story. They love the moment when everything looks polished and obvious. Why do you think social media is so addictive? Everybody loves the highlight reels. But that messy middle, that trying phase, I'm not exactly sure how this will work, but I'm going to move towards making it work anyway phase. That's the part that makes people uncomfortable. And your healing is the same way. Before healing becomes visible, it often looks like somebody doing too much. Oh, now you journaling. Oh, okay. Now you setting boundaries. Now you're going to therapy. Now you talking about the emotional patterns and the generational cycles and curses and all the things that you want to break. And see, people who have never done that kind of work, they're going to start looking at you sideways. Like, what are you doing? Right? But what they're really doing is reacting to something unfamiliar, because growth changes your habits. Growth changes your language. Growth changes what you tolerate. So to someone who is used to the old version of you, this new version of you is going to look strange. Because here's the truth that we forget. The people that we admire today, they all had a season where their choices looked confusing to others. I mean, just think about it. Every entrepreneur that you respect had a period where people thought their ideas were unrealistic. Every artist had a moment where people didn't understand their work. Every person who healed deeply had a time where people thought that they were overthinking everything. Before the results become clear, the journey often looks uncertain. That's just the nature of change. Innovation, healing, and growth almost always look unfamiliar in the beginning. Because if everybody understood it, it wouldn't be new. And I think that this is where a lot of people get stuck, right? Hey, Mr. Awesome, welcome in, bro. I think that this is the part where people get stuck, right? They stop moving the moment that their choices start looking unusual to others, right? They show up and they start explaining themselves, justifying themselves, second guessing themselves. Thank you, bro. And, it's all because they don't want to look strange. But the truth is, if you're doing something genuinely different, you're probably going to look strange for a while. That's the price of early admission, right? Of being early. The price of being the first in your circle to try something. The price of stepping outside what's normal in your environment. And listen, looking strange for a season isn't the worst thing in the world. Living a life that you secretly resent because you were afraid to look different, that's a heavier price. So if you find yourself in a season where your choices feel misunderstood, where people are questioning what you're doing, where your path doesn't make perfect sense yet, just breathe. Take a breath. Understand that you might not be doing it wrong. You might just be doing something new. Stop explaining your vision to people who can't see it. Not everybody deserves access to your dreams. And I know that might sound harsh at first, but it's real. Because when something is new in your life, when a vision is still forming, or when an idea is still fragile, when you're still trying to figure out how it's all going to come together, it is easy to feel like you need to prove it to people. And a lot of times what happens is we start sharing it with everybody, right? We start explaining the plan, breaking down the details, trying to help people see what you see, because you out here looking for confirmation and validation. So you're trying to help them understand why it matters to you, why it's so important that you do this, like this, right now. And instead of protecting the vision, you end up defending the vision, right? Because when you share that with the wrong people, you are always going to be stuck explaining, trying to convince people that it makes sense, trying to justify why it matters, answering questions that were never meant to shape the direction of your vision in the first place. And the problem with that is simple. The more you explain your dream to someone who doesn't understand it, the more you start feeling like you need to convince them. Right? Thank you for the follow, Wayne. And once you start trying to convince people, then all of a sudden doubt creeps in. Because every time they question it, every time they look confused, or every time they respond with hesitation instead of excitement, your confidence starts getting chipped away a little bit. Not because your vision is wrong, but because you've exposed it to voices that were never meant to carry the weight of the conversation. And let's be honest, some people aren't asking questions because they're curious. They're asking questions because they're skeptical. They just want to poke holes in it. Yep, you get sucked right into it. Because what they tell us, misery loves company. So when you show up being your bright ray of sunshine, baby, I'm looking for the toxic energy, right? So they're going to poke holes in it. They just want to test your certainty, trying to measure whether your dream makes sense according to their understanding of the world. Butterfly, welcome in. And here's the reality that I've learned over the years. Some people can't see what you see because their expectations don't give them the framework to understand it. If someone has never built something before, they may not understand the process. If someone has never done the emotional work, they may never understand your healing journey. If someone has never pursued the calling, or pursued a calling that has required risk, they may not understand why you're willing to step out the familiar. Thank you. And again, you guys, that doesn't make them bad people, right? It just means that they're not the right audience for your vision. Not every single idea needs public commentary. Not every dream needs a group discussion. Not every single step in your life has to be explained to the room. Because some things simply just need quiet protection while they're growing. I mean, think about a seed. When it is first planted, it is fragile, right? You don't dig it up every day to show everybody what's happening underneath the soil. You're like, look what I did, look what I did. And you re-dig the seed up. Like, you see this little seed? I planted it yesterday. Okay, let me put it back in the ground tomorrow. Okay, wait. Look, y'all, it's been 2 days. Look at this little seed. No, you don't invite 10 people to inspect it and give their opinion on whether it's growing fast enough. You give it the conditions that it needs. You water it. You give it patience, time, protection. You plant the seed and you let God handle the growth. Exactly. Let me pin that. She said the vision was given to you, so access should not be granted to everyone. Come on now. You better. And listen, eventually when it grows strong enough and those results become visible, they'll see it. They'll see everything that they need to see. And you have to understand that your dreams work the same way. In the early stages, they need protection more than they need explanation. They need your focus more than they need other people's opinion. Your dreams need your belief more than it needs outside validation. Because if you expose something too early to too many voices, you risk letting someone else's doubt interrupt what was still forming inside of you. So sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do is simply move in silence. Build quietly. Heal quietly. Work on the vision without announcing every step. And it's not because you're hiding. It's because you're protecting something that deserves the chance to grow without constant interference. And eventually, the results will speak for themselves. And when they do, you won't have to explain that vision to nobody because people will see it. But until then, just remember that not everybody needs a front row seat to your becoming. Your life is not a committee decision. Your life is not a group project, not a committee vote, not a family consensus. It's not a crowdsourced decision where everybody around you gets equal say in what you do next. True. Welcome back, bro. And I think that a lot of people are out here living like it is. Every single decision has to be discussed. Every idea has to be approved. What up, though? Every move has to be explained. You start thinking about doing something different, and suddenly it feels like you need to gather feedback from the entire room before you move. What do you think about this? Do you think that makes sense? Do you think I should do it? And before you know it, the direction of your life starts getting shaped by everybody else's comfort level but your own. And, here's the reality that I don't think people say enough. At the end of the day, you're the only one who has to live with your choices. You're the one who wakes up inside your life every single morning. You're the one sitting with your routine, your career, your relationships, your habits, your environment. Nobody else is waking up inside your decisions but you. So, why are so many people allowing the direction of their life to be determined by people who won't even carry the outcome? Those same people who give opinions about, what you should do won't be the ones sitting with you, if the consequences strike. They won't be the ones dealing with the frustration if you abandon your dreams. They won't be the ones asking themselves 10 years from now, what if I had just tried? See, that question belongs to you. And that's why this matters. Because regret rarely comes from the things that we attempted and struggled through. Most people can make peace with the things that they've tried, even if it didn't work, even if it took longer than expected. Hell, even if it failed, even if it required readjustments along the way. What most people struggle with is something entirely different. Most people struggle with the quiet regret of realizing they never gave themselves the chance. The realization that they talked themselves out of it, that they delayed it, shrank it, or abandoned it completely because someone else's opinion felt louder than their own inner voice. And I honestly believe that is the kind of regret that sits with you for a really long time, because it's not about failure. It's about possibilities that were never explored, dreams that stayed in the imagination instead of becoming an experience, paths that were never walked because the room didn't approve. And listen, I'm not saying that seeking wise counsel is a bad thing. I think that it is amazing to have mentors and advisors and coaches and, people who genuinely want the best for you. I think that can be incredibly valuable. But here's the difference between seeking wisdom and outsourcing your life decisions. Wisdom provides perspective, but it doesn't take ownership of your life in any way, right? Because ultimately, no committee is responsible for your purpose. No vote determines your direction. No room full of opinions gets the final say over what you do with, the one life that you've been given to live. Your life is not meant to be lived according to majority vote. It's meant to be lived according to the convictions that keep calling your name. And one day when you look back over all the choices that you've made, the only questions that truly matter is, did I at least try? Did I trust the pull that I felt towards something more? Did I move forward even when the room was uncertain? Did I give myself permission to explore what was possible? Because when you can answer those questions honestly, There's a peace that comes with knowing that you didn't let other people's comfort dictate the boundaries of your life. So if I can encourage you to do nothing else today, I just want to encourage you to give yourself the permission that you keep looking for. Because if you keep waiting for other people who never left their comfort zone to approve of your next step, you might be waiting forever. Because people naturally encourage what feels safe to them, not what's right for you, not what's aligned with your purpose, not with your spirit, what your spirit keeps pulling you towards. Just what feels familiar from where they're standing. And safety looks good depending upon, the life that somebody else has chosen to live. For someone who built their life around predictability, risk always looks uncertain. For someone who has avoided emotional work, healing always looks excessive. For someone who has accepted certain patterns as just the way things are, growth will always look disruptive to them. So when you bring something new into the room, be it a new idea, new direction, a new standard for your life, there are going to be people who respond from that lens. Not because they're trying to sabotage you, but because your decision doesn't fit inside of their definition of safe. And this is where the real tension starts to show up, because the life that you're meant to build might require things that don't always look comfortable from the outside. Your purpose might require risk. It might require stepping away from what's familiar, and it might require learning things that nobody around you has ever learned before. Your healing might require honesty about the patterns that you've been carrying, honesty about the pain that you've been avoiding, honesty about the relationships or habits that no longer fit the version that you are becoming. And honesty is uncomfortable for people who prefer things to stay surface level. Your growth might require change. And when I say change, I'm talking about new boundaries, new conversations, new environments, new standards for how you treat yourself and how you allow others to treat you. And we know that change almost always disrupts the systems that people are used to. So when you're waiting for approval from the room before you move forward, you're asking people who are comfortable with the old system to approve a change that is going to disrupt. And that's hard. That's a really hard approval to get. Not impossible, but unlikely. So today, instead of asking the questions that many people default to, right? Do they think it's a good idea? Try asking a different question, a quieter one, a more honest one. Instead of worrying about everybody else, ask yourself, is this aligned with who I'm becoming? Not who I used to be, not who other people expect me to be or expect me to stay, but who you're becoming. The version of you that is healing, the version of you that is becoming more aware, the version of you that is no longer to abandon his or her own growth just to keep everybody else comfortable. Because alignment is a different kind of compass, right? When something is aligned, you may still feel fear, but you also feel clarity. You may still feel uncertainty, but something in your spirit will keep pulling you forward. Thank you for the heart, Mies. It's that quiet knowing that says this might be hard, but it feels true. It feels right. Yes, alignment is the assignment. And when you start living from alignment instead of approval, your decisions start changing. You stop explaining every move. You stop asking the room for permission, and you just start trusting the direction that keeps showing up in your heart and your thoughts and your prayers and your reflections. Not recklessly, but courageously. Because at some point you realize that the permission that you've been looking for from everyone else was always yours to give yourself. So family, before we close today, I really just want to pause for a moment and really reflect on this. Where in your life have you been asking for permission from people who never had the courage to pursue their own dreams? Where have you been shrinking your vision just to keep the room comfortable? Where have you been explaining yourself over and over again, hoping that eventually someone will nod their head and say, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for the heart puffs." And let's go even deeper. Where have you delayed your healing because the people around you weren't ready to face their own truth? Where have you stayed quiet about what you really want because speaking out loud might disrupt the expectations that other people have placed on you? Where have you convinced yourself to wait just a little longer? Another year, another season, another moment, until the people around you feel comfortable with your growth. Because here's the truth that I think a lot of people learn later in life. If your growth depends on everyone else to be comfortable at first, you're going to spend a long time waiting. And sometimes the biggest shift in your life doesn't happen when the circumstances change. It happens the moment that your perspective changes. The moment you realize that you don't need unanimous support. The moment that you realize that you don't need everybody else to understand. You don't need a room full of people agreeing with your vision before you take that next step. What you actually need is the courage to move anyway. The courage to trust the direction that keeps calling your name. The courage to pursue what feels aligned, even when it looks unfamiliar. The courage to simply honor your growth, even if it means outgrowing the expectations that were once placed on you. Because sometimes the path that you are meant to walk will only become clear after you start moving. Not before. And if you keep waiting for certainty from the outside world, you may miss that quiet conviction that is already speaking inside of you. So the affirmation that I have for you today is simple but powerful. And it is, I release the need for approval from people who never pursued their own purpose. I release the need for approval from people who have never pursued their own purpose. I release the need for approval from people who have never pursued their own purpose. I'm trying to get it for y'all, TikTok. Hold on. Here we go. I don't even think it's going to show up. Lord. Let me see. Let me try again, y'all. No, they don't want it to be posted in here. Well, I'm trying to post it in here, y'all, but I release the need for approval from people who have never pursued their own purpose. And just let that sit with you. Understand that you're not responsible for shrinking your life just to keep other people comfortable. You're responsible for honoring the life that you have been given. Now, before we close, let me leave you all with a little love and light. As always, I am here to encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self-Care Club and in the Room to Breathe family, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't you be afraid to take up space, speak your truth, and make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. This has been another Room to Breathe podcast, and I look forward to connecting with you all again soon. Thank you.